Hello, everyone. We're about to begin the next session. If everyone could take their seats. So I am going to be reading again from the Uprising and Resistance anthology. This book has just meant so much to all of us, and the poems that I've written in there documents not only where the commodification of black bodies begin, which in Lloyd's case was in the coffee shops, but also explores the getting rid of bodies with like rotten foods that were on the ships as well. But the poem that I'll be discussing is what it looks like to be a child bought through slavery, because majority of the research that we received kind of touched on men and women experiences and not children, so I kind of wanted to explore that. So this is Playdates for Sale. Mothers browse auction blocks for toys, or greased bodies on display with price tags and trembling smiles. Each toy comes with a whip that winds us up for longer lasting playtimes. A woman purchases me as a doll. I am hunched over in a brown box with no manual. Before handing me over, the salesman says no refunds. If broken, dispose of how you wish. Perhaps a play funeral could be fun. Remember 5% off on your next doll. I arrive at my new home. The woman tosses me into her daughter's playroom. My unboxing frightening. I peek my head out to see a small ghost with gawking eyes in front of me. She does not call me by the name my mama gave me, but the one her mother shouts. Playtime begins swiftly. We play doctor. Her father's shirt, a white coat. His whip, a stethoscope around her neck. I am the only patient. She asks where it hurts, and I want to say where your mama burned me. Tea time. She is a bakery owner serving horse manure, mud, and her father's piss. I am a Rottweiler on all fours, tongue sticking out. Hide and seek. I hide, her dogs hunt. Dress up ends the day. She dresses me as a runaway, plucking my hair out like goose feathers. Plant shrubs in what is left of my afro and shreds my clothes. After all this, I am her lullaby. My mama's stories soothe her till my lips crack and she is snugged asleep. I want to play a game where I am invisible and child. Thank you.
Thank you, that was beautiful. All right, welcome to our second panel. I'll be your moderator today. And this panel's theme is slavery. I am going to call projects to come to the stage. We have 5 minutes. I'll be sitting in that corner like Sasha, and I will be showing you this very strict 1 minute sign when we get there. Now, the project order is slightly different than the one on the website, on the printed schedule. We had some last minute changes. The updated order is in the website, in the schedule. So the first project we will hear from today, and please join me in welcoming them, is the Black Testimony Project.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I just need to pull up my notes. So I'm Adasia Leverett. I'm a second-year PhD student in history here at Johns Hopkins and the lab lead for the Black Testimony Project. And I'll allow my team members to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Sanaa. I'm a spring 2023 graduate of Howard University, and as Moderator said, I'm also a part of the Black Testimony Project.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Shipman. I graduated with Sanaa from Howard last year with a degree in art history.
Please use the mic.
Yeah, come on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Xavier Walker. I'm a Community Archives Fellow with Inheritance Baltimore, based out of Hopkins, and I'm also a member of the Black Testimony Project.
Okay, so my notes are not here, and that is fine. We're going to carry on. So the Black Testimony Project is also a collective of researchers who are very interested in learning about the historic presence of Black people, specifically formerly enslaved people, and the first generation of researchers like Ophelia Settle Egypt, who have done foundational work to allow us to access these archival materials. We're really interested in how those testimonies surface in slavery's archive, how Black researchers of this first generation discerned, engaged with, and collected in a careful manner the testimonies of formerly enslaved people. We're not, two of our team members are not here. I want to recognize them, Leanna Mason and also Nyla Jones. You can define testimony, please, yeah, but hold on a second. I don't, it's not here, and I know I want you to read it out. I'm so sorry. We were prepared.
We did say before we started, it always goes wrong when you have the pressures on and then nothing goes right.
Do you remember any of the definition, or should I? So I can loosely define how we think about testimony. Testimony is essentially one's articulation of their story. It's a form of their truth-telling. When we think about Black testimony, it's uninterrupted, untouched, a way for them to espouse their truth in a manner that is invaluable to how we understand testimony. It comes in many forms. It could be oral testimony, it could be visual art, it could be dance, and it's very representative of their experience and their person. And I think it's also embodied in who they are. And this definition of testimony is very much a work in progress. We're thinking about kind of how to expand this and how to be more inclusive of a number of diverse voices as we continue to engage with the archive. Ophelia Settle Egypt is the collection that we've looked at most recently in our formative months. We are a relatively new microlab, and we're using archival materials at Howard University in the manuscript division of Moreland Spingarn Research Center. We've worked a lot under the guidance of Dr. Johnson. AFOA also has been very supportive, and specifically with folks at Moreland Spingarn, Mrs. Sharice Thompson, Ms. Sonia Woods, as well as Ms. Bria Jones, who have been also very helpful and foundational in allowing us access to the archival materials, even though they've had a lot of renovations. So Ophelia Settle Egypt is an African-American woman who was a sociologist, an educator, very interested in social work, social justice, I'd even say. And she is of this first generation, like notable sociologists, Charles Johnson, who have done foundational work in the 20th century, some of the first work around oral testimonies. Unwritten History of Slavery is a published work, published in 1945, and it's in consultation with Charles Johnson as well as J. Masuka. And the collection and transcription of Ophelia Settle Egypt, as well as another Black woman stenographer who I don't have a name for at this moment, and then also a typist who's also a Black woman. We're very careful in their interactions with formerly enslaved people and accounting for their testimonies in a very ethical manner. And so I think ethics is something that we are very interested in as a microlab, and thinking about how we continue to access these archival materials and these oral testimonies, keeping ethics in mind. I'll allow you to note about the other things related to Ophelia Settle Egypt.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the significance of the narratives she collected. So to those who don't know, the narratives that Ophelia Settle Egypt collected predate the WPA narratives by a decade. She collected them from 1928 to 1930 under the direction of Charles S. Johnson at Fisk University, as Madeja stated. And because she worked with a team of Black women herself and 2 other Black women, she was able to connect with the interviewers in a way that white interviewers from the WPA narratives were not. So she was able to really get to the right questions and cover things that go beyond like broad themes that we think about when we talk about slavery.
Thank you.
Now we invite to the podium the First Blacks Project, where Alice and Anthony.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone who is with us virtually as well. It is so invigorating to see that the ancestors are finding so many mediums to be present. Wow. Whew. You know, they're here through so many of us, through so many projects. They're owning the space, they're owning the data. I am Lisette Acosta Corniel, and I'll let my colleague introduce himself. I was a research associate for the First Blacks in the Americas project. We are only 1/8 of the original team of First Blacks that is housed at the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute in the City College of New York, one of the 25 CUNY institutions.
My name is Anthony Stevens Acevedo. I'm the leading researcher of the First Blacks Project.
Project director. Yeah, project director. Why First Blacks? When Christopher Columbus arrived in the island of Hispaniola, a free servant arrived with Christopher Columbus in 1492. And then subsequently, enslaved Africans were requested by Governor Nicolás de Obando. And subsequently, the transatlantic slave trade initiated in what today is the Republic of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, with Santo Domingo, what today is the capital of the Dominican Republic, as the first port of entry for the transatlantic slave trade. A fact that is listed most of the times as a footnote in the scholarship of slavery. And one of my critiques in my upcoming book, Transatlantic Bondage, Slavery and Freedom in Spain, Santo Domingo, and Puerto Rico, plug, is the fact, with SUNY Press, is the fact, okay, that scholars have been following the sugar. We want scholars to follow the people. And yet today, okay, scholars are not following the people of 16th century slavery. And First Blacks is an invitation to that. Why also First Blacks? Because the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute has a strong link, a strong connection with the community, Washington Heights, named Little Dominican Republic in 2018. Why also First Blacks and how we were able to conceive and produce First Blacks? Because as a research institution, we had the flexibility when we were part of the institute. My colleague is happily retired. And now I teach, not just a researcher, but now I teach at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. But because we were able to focus on research, the entire staff was able to focus on research and not the burden that faculty have to carry of conducting research, teaching, and the service. And that helped a lot. The project was financed, sponsored by internal departments at City College, and we were grateful for that, and also by the Ministry of Culture in Spain. So in sum, the flexibility of the research, the cultural connection, and the intellectual connection of the staff, and the interest was what allowed us to come up with First Blacks. And I want to share with you the functionality of the website. it's not going to be like a live demonstration because it's PowerPoint, right? But what First Blacks does is that it allows you to go to the interface of the data set. When you go all the way to the right, you will go to where it says resources. You click on archival sources, and you are able to select which document you would like to study. The beautiful thing, or one of the beautiful things about the website, is that when you hover over the mouse over any of the documents, we provide a short summary of what the document is about, and if you're interested, you click on it, and if not, you continue to look and read all of them, or you just move on to the next document. When you find a document that you're interested in, the one that I selected this time is document 017, which actually, if you go to the search section here and you put toes, it will bring you to this document. I know this because we curated the documents, and therefore I know that the word toes is there. So you can do the same search with other words. The reason why we selected this document today is because this document is about an incident that happened in Santo Domingo with enslaved Africans who had allegedly committed a crime, and they were sanctioned to being punished with the cutting of their toes. And this was done on purpose because they wanted to make sure, and this is what the document says, and now I'll show you how you can find out what the document actually says, this was done purposely, and this is said by the surgeon, so that the enslaved could continue to work. So if you cut their toes, it's not that bad. They can continue to perform their duties. And now move on quickly. This is the document, and the beautiful thing is that we provide you with the manuscript, the transcription, the translation, and a commentary about the document. So you get the actual manuscript, and if you want to learn paleography, Professor Anthony Stevens Acevedo offers a free paleography course online. Therefore, see him with your email and information. And now pass it with the 1 minute left to Professor Stevens. I saw you, Alex.
Thank you. I just wanted to focus briefly on one issue that I consider like believe it or not, mostly a political aspect of this whole effort, which has to do with, in my view, this is a very personal testimony. I no longer work at CUNY. I no longer work at CUNY DSI. But I see First Blacks as the result of a very peculiar, let's say, historical academic opportunity or juncture that happened within the Dominican community, immigrant Dominican community in New York City, of which I'm part as one of the few elderlies and nowadays born in New York City. I was born in the 50s of a Dominican working class, seamstress lady. The CUNY Dominican Studies Institute was created as a demand on the part of the Dominican community. Literally, people from the community went and sat down with the chancellor and said, we need an academic space that allows us to study ourselves and tell the world who we are, not just allow the media and TV to say to the American public who Dominicans and Dominican Americans are. So a very special situation happened when this research institute, which is exclusively mandated to do research, not teaching, was created. Because it was created with a level of institutional flexibility that allowed for a lot of autonomy and a lot of space for diversity. And what I'm pointing at is at the fact that that situation allowed for someone like myself, and I have to talk about myself because that's how it happened. It's not just bluffing here, It allowed for somebody that had some level of historical technical training, especially in terms of reading old sources, what Lisette was referring to, as paleographic skills with no PhD degree to work in a research project, allocating a lot of time to that research project, and then with my, at the time, still limited English language limits, engage in researching the documents, translating the documents into English from Spanish, and then doing the comments. So my point is, it's very important for us to try to carve spaces in our institutions where we maximize diversity and opportunity, because otherwise a guy like myself would have never been able to participate in something like this. So that's it.
Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Freedom on the Move to the podium.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pamela Walker. I'm an assistant professor of history at the University of Vermont. I'm really glad to be here and be in this space with you all. I'm going to be talking about Freedom on the Move. Freedom on the Move is a collaborative, crowdsourced digital database of advertisements seeking the return of freedom-seeking people to their enslavers. Freedom on the Move collects all ads from North American papers from the colonial era to the Civil War. Currently, there are about 40,000 advertisements on the website, with the expectation of 100,000 to be added to the digital database. I worked on Freedom on the Move as a master's student at the University of New Orleans, and I've used it in the classroom. I've also used it teaching at freedom schools in the Mississippi Delta over the years. It's housed at Cornell University Library, and from its inception, it was meant to be a tool for educating and working with students on slavery, resistance, and self-emancipation. And so self-emancipated people are some of the most well-known African Americans of this era. They're some of the first African Americans that school children learn about in published narratives, discussing their journeys from slavery to freedom in abolitionist text. Self-emancipated people, especially those who engage in the Underground Railroad, have also been a part of popular American culture and media that's engaged in storytelling around self-emancipated people. But there are these thousands of advertisements which appear in American newspapers that tell the story of a kind of collective, massive resistance to slavery and freedom that persisted through emancipation. And so these ads offer a broader story of collective, massive resistance. And when reading these ads, we have to understand the purposes in which they initially served. They upheld structures of power in many ways. They reinforced and prescribed discourses around race, embodied criminality, the legal reality that African Americans were always eligible for enslavement when whites were not. And they also invited whites of all ranks and classes to participate in social and physical violence. Any black person could be searched, questioned, reported, or deemed suspicious through these advertisements. And there were typically two types of ads. First, there were the ads placed by individual enslavers meant to describe the enslaved people and provide relevant information about where they might have been headed, what they were wearing, even the scars and distinguishing features on their bodies. And then there were ads that were placed by jailers meant to reach enslavers who would then be expected to pay an expense for keeping enslaved people in custody. So this project was started, collecting these ads was started in 2013 by Ed Baptist at Cornell, Josh Rothman at the University of Alabama, Molly Mitchell at the University of New Orleans. They were joined by Vanessa Holden at the University of Kentucky and Hassan Jeffries at Ohio State. And this team, along with multiple programmers, librarians, teams of graduate students, have been driving the charge, collecting the data, making it searchable, and creating this detailed database that is available to scholars, teachers, genealogists, lay people. And as I mentioned, I was a part of this project. And the earliest wave of data collection, combing 19th century newspapers, clipping, transcribing, and then adding that to a drive that would later become the database. Of course, there are the ethical concerns regarding reducing humans to data points, reifying the racial categorizations and ideas around criminality. And so the team of Freedom on the Move really approached this thinking about an ethics of care. How do they care for these resources and these complicated individuals without flattening and reducing them? How do they make these materials accessible, inclusive? And so the team really strives for collaboration with the community. They've worked with educators and curriculum developers, hard history, and schools in New Orleans to work with these materials and work with students on these materials. And so quickly, I'll just go through some of the work of public engagement with Freedom on the Move and what this has been looking like in New Orleans and working with middle grades and college students. And so one of the ways that Freedom on the Move has been working with students is through kind of mapping self-liberating people. Mobility was really important, even if mobility was only temporary. So UNO students created story maps using ads that they pulled from New Orleans newspapers. They navigated and read these ads against the grain to uncover skills and strategies of enslaved people in the city, and really allow us to see the cityscape in new ways, to find various spaces of resistance, freedom, and self-employment. And this is the case of one of the ads that students work with. This advertisement mentions Jane seen 2 or 3 mornings past Poydras and St. Mary's Market. And so students are working with mapping and story maps to spatialize the narratives of freedom seekers, not just where they went, but also the various structures and architectures of control, and also the potential sites of community and safety along the way. And this deepens students' understandings of the challenges that freedom seekers face and the opportunities that they seize for themselves. We also have just various examples of working with middle grade students, and a lot of this work is allowing students to engage with these materials, rethinking fugitivity and self-liberation through creative responses. So there have been numerous symposia in New Orleans, bringing middle grade and high school students together where they're presenting after their interactions with these materials, responding through poetry, dance, music, and visual art. And so this is just one piece of art from a middle grade student who's rethinking and using these advertisements to create kind of creative representations of what they experience by going through and working with these advertisements. This is just one other example, another visual art example from a middle school student representing freedom seekers Harry and Marita who escaped with a fiddle. And so I think some of this curriculum work and the work that students are doing has been some of the most rewarding outcomes of the project. And there's kind of ongoing curriculum work that folks in New Orleans are doing in collaboration with educators and hard history and comic book writers and various folks in the community to make this work more accessible. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming my dear friend, Professor Marlene Dowd, who will present to us the Haitian Revolutionary France Project. Fictions Project, yes, Fictions Project.
Good morning, everybody. So this is the Haitian Revolutionary Fictions Project. One thing to keep in mind is this is a teaching project. It's a teaching resource, and that will be important in a moment. So the Haitian Revolutionary Fictions Project I started in 2014 to keep track of fictions, things that were written as novels, short stories, plays, poems about the Haitian Revolution for a book I was writing. I put them online on a website, and people started accessing the website, and they began to ask how they could access those writings because many were located overseas in various archives and libraries. They were rare manuscripts for the most part, few famous ones that were republished more recently, but for the vast majority of them were not readily accessible. So I began the work of thinking about how to turn the website into some type of repository when I was contacted by school teachers in San Bernardino County. I was living in California at the time, and they said, oh, we would really like to teach this. And I explained to them my idea for the website, and they said, oh, no, we can't teach it like that because these novels are 5 volumes and they're written in French, and what we need is a book. So I recruited Grégory Pierrot and Marion Rohleitner, and we spent 7 years making a volume and a book that is taught. Teachers are using this book. It has, but one of the things we sort of stumbled across as we were working on the book were a lot of images. And so I'm going to show you some of the images that are in the book. And I can, talk about their context later, but these are images that accompanied works that are published in this book. This is a playbill from one of the plays. This is from William Edgar Easton. So I'm going to stop at this one. So this one is not in one of the books, but we used this to contextualize all these poems that were written about the indemnity that described the French king as the true liberator of the Haitian people. And they were published alongside these kinds of broadsides that showed this as well. One thing to note is in the book, the images are not in color. So that's unfortunate because of the way that printing practices happen and where books are printed domestically or overseas. And so we began to think about what would happen if we started collecting the various frontispieces, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them, that are in these books, not just in the fictional books as well, or not just accompanying poems and plays, gathering and collecting them together, instead of creating a digital repository of the works themselves, which would be complicated for a number of reasons. And a lot of databases now, like 18th Century Studies collection that libraries have subscriptions to, do contain these works. So we thought about the fact that these are not well-known images because most of the time when people write articles about the Haitian Revolution for the popular sphere, they pull from Getty images or they pull from really well-known sources. These are some of the most well-known images of the Haitian Revolution, whereas this image was the most popular in its era, but you wouldn't necessarily know that from now because the most of the time you're seeing the burning of Cap Haitien, you're seeing the Rainsford images, so it's a bit ahistorical. What happens when the Haitian Revolution actually does get discussed is that places like Getty and Shutterstock and those type of companies that have put the images in their databases to be pulled, it makes it seem like those are the most important images when actually historically something like this was much more well known because it accompanied a popular work. The one on the left there, that's most of the time if you write an article about the Haitian Revolution, your editor just Googles and pulls that image and then you have to fight with them to get them to use a different image. But yet in the era, it was images like this and afterwards that circulated. This is another one that accompanied a novel. It's in the 19th century, one of the most well-known and referenced images, but again, most people wouldn't have seen this frontispiece. But when we encountered images like this as well, and talking with our students, we realized, if we make this digital repository, it also has to be an exhibit because these are not celebratory images. You could read them that way. You see Toussaint Louverture, he's presiding, he's reading his constitution, but the author very clearly tells us in the preface to the work that Toussaint Louverture has Cap burned or has Henri Christophe burn the city because he wishes to preside over ashes as long as he presides. So he's essentially poking fun of him at that time. Again, this image here, Grégory has in his monograph, The Black Avenger in Atlantic Culture, a version of this image on his cover. But in the 19th century, again, a very, very popular image that shows Black aggression against white people when actually what really happened, especially in the early days of the Revolution, as the French tried to quash it, was actually white aggression against Black people. And yet these, again, are some of the most popular images you'll see. And I will stop with their contemporary art. We also want to give homage to and space to contemporary artists who have noticed the way that the visual culture from the 18th and 19th century, from the Revolution, distorts Black suffering and death. And in this image, you see Kamathi Doncourt actually refocusing on what the revolutionaries and other Black people living in the era would suffer, and then celebratory images of the Haitian Revolution and its various moments. And if you want to learn more about what we are hoping to do, we have some partners. Well, I made a story map that can be taught as well in the classroom if students don't want to read the book, or some of the works are more inaccessible. And then the OER, Open Resources Education Project, we have a video in which we talk about the history of the Haitian Revolution, and we talk about its literary components, which is often a great way to get students interested in it, because they can learn about how writers like Voltaire or the Abbé Raynal or other people they've heard of like Victor Hugo are participating also in this narrative. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Please join me in welcoming to the podium the Nelson Hackett Project. Where are you guys?
Hello to everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers for this. It's been just a tremendously awesome event, and so thank you. I am Michael Pierce. I teach at the University of Arkansas.
And I'm Carrie Banton. I am the chair of the Department of History at the University of Arkansas.
She doesn't let me call her boss publicly, but so our project is a little different than most of the other ones here in that sense that we are focused on one person. And one person is the center of what we're trying to do, and that is Nelson Hackett. And right now, every one of you, or most of you, are thinking, who is Nelson Hackett? And he was a fugitive, like Professor Walker talks about. In 1841, wait a minute. In 1841, he fled Fayetteville, Arkansas. He makes his way 360 miles through slave territory in Arkansas and Missouri. Another 600 miles across the free states of the Midwest, into Canada at Detroit, and 50 more miles to the town of Chatham. The guy who claims to own him, a guy named Alfred Wallace, followed him and had Nelson Hackett extradited, because Nelson Hackett took a horse, a saddle, a coat, possibly a gold watch. The evidence for that is really iffy. And the guy who owns Nelson Hackett had him extradited for theft, for stealing these things. And the Canadian government, a new governor, wanted to make nice with the United States, and he sent Nelson Hackett back. Nelson Hackett became the first, and we'll find out only, enslaved person that Canada extradited back to slavery. And he was sent back in February of 1842, and he is lodged in the Detroit jail for 2 months. At this time, the free black community in Detroit rises up, sounds the alarm, and they try to protest this. They know if slavers can go and make charges, they know that enslavers will use charges of theft as a pretext to claim thousands and thousands of fugitives living in Canada. And the black men in Detroit, and they were men, raised the alarm. And they mobilized the entire abolitionist community, Anglo world, to try to prevent this. And they failed. And Nelson Hackett's taken back to Fayetteville, where we live and teach, and he is tortured, and he is sold to Texas, which was the equivalent of a death sentence. There is a little bit of hope in the story. The last evidence we have of Hackett's existence is that he escaped again. But here's this part of the story that gives everyone hope. This Atlantic world abolitionist community refuses to let Hackett's extradition set a precedent. At this time, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, as many of you might know, was being negotiated to regulate the borders between British North America and the United States. And Article 10 of the treaty was an extradition article. And the abolitionists had to get rid of it. And they lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. They went to Queen Victoria, they went to Parliament, and what they got is the British government to basically make the extradition of enslaved people impossible. This project, we have a website with documents, maps that allow you to trace this, documents that can be searched, was a public history project. I'm sorry, a public humanities project. It came about because Donald Trump launched his campaign saying that people from Mexico were mostly murderers and rapists. And a group of scholars, and you know, I keep thinking, and we come from a red state, a deeply red state.
One of the states that has banned Black history, critical race theory.
And what a group of us did is a series of public humanities projects talking about Asian migration, talking about Latinx migration, talking about Fayetteville being on the Trail of Tears and what that means. And this is the project is an outgrowth of that. And it's also weird because I'm a white guy.
No. Light skin.
And we've used this project to get rid of the erasure of black folks. And it's an erasure of all sorts of non-white people in Arkansas. And we've had NEH teaching institutes. What else have we done?
Yeah, we did an NEH teaching institute back in 2022. And we have resources that we gathered from teachers who came to Northwest Arkansas for that summer institute and made lesson plans for their students to go back, because we're trying to use the Nelson Hackett project to really destabilize the narratives that has gathered around how we understand the U.S. Civil War, to really focus it on the fugitivity of enslaved people who really kind of led to the Civil War. So we're using Nelson Hackett to show that, to kind of disturb that narratives that really takes away Lincoln freed the slaves and all of that from, you know, the the people who took their agency into their own hands and freed themselves. So please check out our website.
And we're having a conference on Nelson Hackett. Lots of scholars are coming to Fayetteville to talk about him and his thing in September?
Yes, September, first week of September.
And so you all should come. Fayetteville's a nice place, even if it's...
Yeah.
Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Remains an Archive.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Good morning. Yes, still morning. My name is Kevin Asen. I'm a PhD candidate in educational psychology at McGill University in Montreal, and this is my Remains an Archive co-lead, Jessica Newby, who is a PhD candidate in history at Johns Hopkins, and I'll pass over to Jessica.
Remains, noun. That which remains, pieces, scraps, fragments, etc., that are left unused or still extant as after use, consumption, or the passage of time. December 8, 1761. Marked my new Negroes on the right shoulder, TT. Cuba, 4 foot 6 inches high, about 15 years of age, country name Malia, in Igbo. Lives with princess. 31 words, pieces, scraps, and fragments recorded in an archive of violence and dehumanization. 31 words lifted from a slave owner's diary, punctuated with heavy and deafening silence. They obscure just as much as they reveal. Memories of a homeland, the names of a mother or father or siblings, the circumstances surrounding a family's fracture, the features of a young girl's face. 31 broken and devastating words, serving as both proof of life and the confirmation of that which will be forever unseen, unheard, unknown, and untold of that life. These words are remains of what was a life of a young African girl named Malia. Brought to Jamaica as a captive of the Atlantic slave trade in 1761, there she would stay for 13 years until 1774 when, after 14 escape attempts, she was sold away to Savannah, Georgia. What witness can one bear to such erasure? What are the words, sounds, and renderings that can even begin to acknowledge this loss without replicating the violence originally inflicted? How does one recover and reconstruct that which was never meant to be representable in the first place?
Remains, verb, a practice of refusal and insistence on survival, to remain. As a microlab, Remains an Archive is composed of scholars from various disciplines, representing various research interests, united in their vision and understanding of Black feminist thought, not only as a framework of knowledge, but as a navigational system of ethics, care, remembrance, and grief. This grief is not merely an expression or show of emotion. It does not signify a foreclosure to or severance with the past. Situated within this Black feminist ethic of care, grief sheds its veneer of stagnation. It refuses loss, erasure, and death as mere conditions. They are predicaments that can, and indeed must be, navigated and contended with. This Black feminist ethic of care and grief is proactive. It persists. It seeks and unearths. It remains. This ethic of care and grieving understands Malia's story as having dual meaning and infinite possibility. These first 31 pieces, scraps, and fragments, as well as others that follow within the archive, are mere, imperfect, and incomplete remains, and yet they remain. Under the guidance of Black feminist thought and principle, we have gathered, sorted, and sought to refashion the archival remains of Malia's story into an intimate, multifaceted project of remembrance that not only spans disciplines, but travels outside of the confines of the academy. This progression has been a gradual and nonlinear one, manifested through a series of phases.
The first phase began with archival research and collection that I conducted as a first-year student in Hopkins History Department, culminating in Country Name Malia, Slavery in Motion, and Rural 18th Century Jamaica. It was a paper and narrative history that departed from previous scholarly treatments and perspectives, and the way that it singled out three of Malia's distinct and yet closely intertwined positionalities of an Igbo, a field laborer, and a mother. A focus upon these three positionalities provided both textual and visual representations of the many negotiations, refusals, and also lamentations that Malia and other enslaved women like her made in response to their circumstances, primarily through their movements.
Okay, we do have a video at the end, but I think we will have to say, I know. Oh, you have to go on Instagram. The next and current phase is Slavery in Motion, a visual exhibit and collaboration between Jessica and 4 other Black women's artists from across the diaspora who inspired by a specific theme and aspect of Malia's life, have created 4 original works that accentuate and memorialize her story through visual, abstract, and sonic mediums. The 4 works will be showcased at in the fall 2024 exhibition by the Diaspora Solidarities Lab at the Avery Research Center in Charleston, South Carolina. We did have a video, but it's this one, but check out our Instagram. Remains archive. It's beautiful, featuring both of us.
In the mid-18th century, a young girl was taken from her home in West Africa. A captive of the Atlantic slave trade, she was brought to the Westmoreland Parish in the British colony of Jamaica, where she was sold into chattel slavery. For the girl's captors, this westernmost corner of the island was the face of the country, a prominent jewel in an island treasure trove overflowing with exports of sugar, rum, coffee, and mahogany. Scores of them migrated across the Atlantic to this rural locale of mountains, valleys, savannas, woodlands, and swamps in order to reap and share in the fruits of an empire's wealth that was made on the backs of its African labor force.
While Westmoreland, Jamaica was their opportunity, it was the girl's death trap. For 13 years, she struggled alongside thousands of other enslaved Africans to survive it. They toiled through excruciating labor regimes in Westmoreland's cane fields, hills, and roads. They contracted infectious diseases that debilitated and disfigured their bodies. They searched endlessly for ways to escape starvation. And always, white fears of rebellion, whether real or imagined, subjected them to extreme and sadistic violence. For the young girl and other African girls and women like her, this violence took the form of constant sexual terrorism. This was the grim reality of enslaved life in the Jamaican death trap. Surviving its many perils and brutalities required a will that was not only determined and resilient, but creative. Scores of enslaved Africans lost the struggle and perished.
Over the course of 13 years, the young girl grew into a woman. Against all odds, and by her own determination, resilience, and creativity, she lived. Her name was Malia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now join me in welcoming our last presentation of this session, the Registro Project from Taller Entre Aguas.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. We are the other half of T, Taller Entre Aguas, part of the Registro Project. I like a little slide. Okay. As you guys saw this morning, our other half, the better half of Criadas Project presented, and we're going to talk about the Registro. Also joining us and directing us is Dr. Jessica Marie Johnson, who was exactly, shout out to her, all the wonderful things that she does. Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Daniel Morales Armstrong, joint PhD candidate in History and Africana Studies at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm ready to be done. With the dissertation, I'm here for this.
Yes. And I don't think I mentioned, my name is Isa Cosette Diaz. I am a PhD candidate, hopefully we'll be defending next month. Yeah, we're almost there. But I'm excited to just talk about the Registro and what we've been doing for the past 2 years. So the Registro Project is actually preserved and housed on the NARA Records, the National Archive Records Administration, and Ancestry.com has the 1872 Slave Register of Puerto Rico. And this was actually collected the year before the abolition in Puerto Rico, and to try to make a sense of how many people were going to be compensated to the owners, right? These masters. And so let's think about the ways that we're trying to create the Registro is make sure that people have access to this information, because when you go onto the NARA records, they have the images, but they're very illegible. And so for the past 2 years, we've created a data set where we've been sharing with community leaders and activists, as well as educators on the island, as well as internationally. The data set is in Spanish, and so what we're also doing is creating a bilingual data set so that people have access to connect and find these stories of the lives of the enslaved Africans based in Puerto Rico. There's about 6 districts. There is one that is missing, but what we have been able to do in the past 2 years is create entries of over 1,400 entries, which is not even 10% of the entire data set. So we only have a small sample, but what we're willing and hoping to do is continue to collaborate with different organizations, different students, so that they can get the training so we can complete the entire Registro. So at the end of our project, or phase of our project, we hope to have a website that will include the data set, as well as oral histories that we're currently collecting in Puerto Rico right now, and a black paper talking about our practice and how we've been able to come together and do this work. This is a small, short sample of what the Registro looks like when you enter Family Search, Ancestry, or the NARA records. As we see, it may list the enslaved person's name, as well as their possible status, their roles. Some people had the opportunity to possibly pay a manumission price. And so right here, what we see on the screen is the difference of someone who was born and noted born in Puerto Rico, probably paid or was willing, having to, forced to pay $400 or pesos to their freedom, as well as compared to another person who was born in Africa. And so my position, I really am really interested as well, is connecting and finding more stories of the people coming from Africa. And in this specific data set in District 1, noticing which towns like Dorado and Capital have enslaved Africans, and they have the most numbers. And so Daniel's gonna talk about specific examples that we've done.
Thank you. So there's each of these entries contains name, place of birth, a whole bunch of other information, right? Including what feels like it should be a really descriptive documentation of what they look like, right? One of the things when we go into the archives, it's like, wow, we don't have an image of this person, right? And there's something that an image makes more tangible, right? It helps bring home the idea that slavery wasn't an abstraction that happened to just more people than we can count, and you know, that any of their individual stories should just be subsumed in the mass wave of all the horror and terror, et cetera. And so we have transcribed all of these bits that include all that information that you see there. And I want to talk about the expectations versus the reality of that data, right? And so we have these descriptions of what they look like and their bodies, right? And yet so much of it reflects the anti-Black caricaturization of Black bodies at the time, right? And that has persisted since. Because so many of the descriptions of their faces feel boilerplate, right? How many people are listed here with in the registro with wide nose, right? Terms like broad lips, those kinds of things, coiled hair, right? Just again and again and again and again, right? And so this doesn't give us the kind of texture that we were hoping for in that way, but it does tell us something about the documentation, right? And about these moments of origin for some of the violence of somebody sitting down and describing you, and it does a disservice to your memory. What else? Let's see. Then there's how these documents give us so much data points that are focused on reducing them to the factors of their enslavement, right? Who the person is, who held them in bondage, etc. All right, I'm going to skip forward a little bit and talk about how, again, we've talked about the violence of the archives and how that shapes the way that people use the data, right? If you're just downloading a 50-page digitization of the registro, right? It doesn't give you a starting point, right? And so what often happens is that people say, okay, so let's look at the aggregate numbers, right? Folks have talked about the dangers of looking at the aggregate data. But we're really asking questions about what the registro tells us about their lives beyond the condition of their enslavement, right? How do we focus on that? I'm going to give two very quick examples. One is an African-born woman named Eusebia and her son Eusebio, right? And the similarities between their names, right? He's born in Puerto Rico, she's born in Africa, we don't know where. But this tells us, or this raises questions for us about naming practices, right? This Eusebia, I can almost guarantee you, was not the name that she had before she arrived in Puerto Rico, right? What does it mean when that name is then passed on to her child, right? Is that a decision that she made of saying, well, I've lived my life for as long as I've been here as Eusebia, right? And so I'll name my son in a way that carries on my legacy, right? Or was this an external imposition of a name of saying, well, mother's named this, so the son is going to be named whatever is similar. And the second is Maria Luisa, Eleuterio, and Isidro in Trujillo Alto, who are documented their eyes, as ojos tristes, right? What does this tell us about their condition, about the ways that they're conveying their assessment of their condition, right? About the ways that that's noted. Is that about the structure of the eye? Is that about the emotion, etc.? And that's all. Happy to talk more later.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes, and then I'll pass the mic to Nadeshda, who has 2 minutes at the end. I'll pass it to you. Okay, sorry, not like this me, not this too, okay? For a launch announcement. I'm sure you guys are looking forward to this, but I want to do a little something different in this 10 minutes. Instead of me having a conversation with the whole team and setting us up, why don't we take a couple of questions from the audience? Yeah? Dorothy?
This is not a Dorothy hot take, don't worry. This is a very calm question. I wonder about all of the projects and how they engage local descendant communities, because that came up yesterday in conversations about data and community and Black involvement, but experiences are different across different enslaving situations. I say this like as a Black Ozarks person, and thinking about how slavery in Northwest Arkansas and Southwest Missouri iterated itself differently than a lot of parts of the country. But I think that that's kind of a through thread through a lot of the projects and how local descendants specifically are engaged with this. So that's for anybody.
I don't mind answering that question. I think it's really interesting in my position in Puerto Rico, not being from Puerto Rico, but based in Puerto Rico. Oh, sorry, so you guys can see me. Yeah, I've been really intentional of including the community in this work because when I was brought into the project, I was curious on who was this data for, why are we creating this database, and how do the people on the ground have access to it? Because there's been so many collectives fighting, especially like before this being the decade of African descendants. But everyone on the ground also needs these resources as well as, once again, the support. And so in the oral histories, in being able to communicate and share the resources that we're getting, they are so grateful. And so being in Puerto Rico, as well as thinking about the diaspora and the, people having their genealogical connections and research that they want to support and have support in this, the community has welcomed us and allowed us to connect with their stories, and they're finding ways to connect to their ancestors, to speak, and also have access to the archives that they didn't have before, that they didn't have the tools. And so it's interesting, but also positive. It's empowering, right? Because once again, it's not something that we're extracting and it's only gonna be based in the States, but the actual people on the ground are being influences, and hopefully soon the talleres part comes in with us creating workshops that we're teaching these tools so they can pass on and we can do the whole database together. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Isa. Yeah, great answer. Yes. You want to stand up, please, and so that we can capture you on the YouTube.
All right. Hi, everyone. These projects are amazing. All of them. You are blowing my mind. So I'm very appreciative of you sharing your work. My question is along public engagement, but more in terms of public response to your projects. How have not only the community that you're benefiting with your work, especially Afro-descendant people, but how are local authorities and beyond academic spaces, although academy is also included, but how are people responding to this? Because it's very counter-hegemonic and it challenges a lot of narratives that sustain the way that our governments and our policies work. So how has your projects broadly to everybody have been received?
Which project has the juiciest story? I figured Paul Hackett project probably.
So a couple of things to answer both questions. So parallel to the Nelson Hackett project was a project by a local Black community group. It's now called the Northwest Arkansas Black Heritage Commission. Which was working with EJI to document episodes of racial violence in Northwest Arkansas. And the leaders of that project looked at the first draft of the Nelson Hackett website, and they read me the Riot Act. And rightfully so. And, you know, and now, we all work together. You know, I mean, I saw it as a learning experience, but I think they also saw it as a learning experience, what it means to bring, I mean, I have an academic skill set that many of them did not have, and it became a collaboration in many ways. But we have been heartened, I think, in Northwest Arkansas with the reception of the Nelson Hackett project. The way, and in fact, it's helping eliminate erasure in a fundamental way. Those people who know anything about Northwest Arkansas, it's in the Ozarks. It's in the mountains of the upland South. And white people in the upland South like to tell themselves stories that enslavement was more benign than in the plantation areas. And we've been awfully intentional to try to put that idea to bed, to kill it. The city of Fayetteville has erected markers. It has renamed streets. It's Nelson Hackett is someone no one had heard about in Fayetteville 3-4 years ago. But now his name is on the street that is central to the city. And so, yeah, it's been good.
Thank you, Michael. Yes.
I wanted to say to all of you, Dr. Gwendolyn Midler Hall was a good friend of mine. And I remember her writing the first database back in 1984. That was 40 years ago. I met her in about 1997. And I spent the last few years studying with her in Guanajuato, Mexico. She wrote that database with no knowledge of the science of what a database. She was not a scientist, she was a historian. I want to say to all of you, think about 40 years from now, the work that you do, what it will mean to the generations to come in this era of technology. I also want to say to you, on behalf of the ancestors, that as I have sat here today and listened to all of the stories about all of the people, known and unknown, that the ancestors say thank you.
I think that's a great place to end our session. Thank you, everybody. You're wonderful. Jessica has a word.
Hello, and in case anybody did not recognize that distinguished woman in the purple, that is Kathy Hambrick, Executive Director of the Amistad Research Center. So another round of applause. And a round of applause again for all the projects that presented. Well, slavery and data tackled today. Just the beginning, not even remotely scratching the starting line as we continue going on in this work period moving forward. I want to remind folks that we do have a B-side moving image room that you should check out the videos. They're all works in progress. It's not quite quiet, but it's meant to be sort of a quiet room, a kind of break, a recuperation from any hard topics that are being discussed, and also just a nice space to gather if you kind of just want to gather and maybe meet some of the projects, make a friend. Some of the projects have been talked about, or some of the people who are here that you might want to meet. Go on and meet in the B-side. That's around the corner in the Barber Conference Room. We will gather again. We're going to break for lunch. 2 p.m. here in this room. We will start sharply on time. We've sort of kind of kept time in a little bit. We got an amazing panel coming up. Reparations is the topic, and then we will tackle what's next steps. For participants who are the project presenters, we have lunch for you in the study in the second floor conference room. For folks who are not presenting projects, we encourage you to check out the many selections that are in the area. We've got various shops and dining all around. It's 2 hours. You could even, check out beyond this area if you wanted to. So we do encourage you to kind of check out the area if you like. And again, come back. 2 o'clock. We cannot wait to see you and have you and continue this conversation in this community. Thank you, everybody. See you too.